Okay, so today we're going to talk about XML Reporter, and for those of you who might be joining from Canada, you'll know it in the future as NAPS Data Exchange Reporter, something like that. This is a tool that's used essentially to take the data that's been validated from your Invista system, generate an XML file in the EPA formats or the Environment Canada NAPS formats, and send them to the end user, who will ingest them through one of several methods. What we're going to do is just go over the way XML Reporter works first and some of the operations within it, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's coming in XML Reporter. And that will be our webinar. It won't take too long. It's a very single purpose type of application, so there's not a lot of detail. So we'll get started. The first thing to know about XML Reporter is that it does have two databases that it is using to make its files and to do its work. The first one is your Invista database, which has all of your data in it from your air network. And the second one is the Reporter Manager database, which is another back-end database that mostly holds lookup tables. So the tables where we would, find out that this sample duration is a specialty code for the EPA. So those types of lookup tables. And then it also holds some things about filters and reports, which we'll talk about. There's a lot of settings in this settings form that are worth mentioning. For instance, right now we're working on a test Wisconsin system, and we have the state selected as Wisconsin. If we didn't have that set, we wouldn't have any data to review, because that state or province setting would be used as a code to find what sites to show. That would be in case some agency were doing something bigger than a single site, state. So like Environment Canada might have this set up for all of Canada to be able to share the data, and when they're looking at it here, they would pick one province at a time to whittle down what they're looking at. There's data exchange logins, the ability to use file transfer protocol to send the data. This will be coming into play with the Environment Canada groups, the NAPS group. And there's lots of other miscellaneous settings that are discussed in the manual. When you start XML Reporter, you'll have a report to create. So there's a report builder and report viewer. These are the tabs that are available now. I'll talk more about tabs that are being added in a few minutes. You'll have this AQS by default if you're in the United States. If you're in Canada, you'll have one called NAPS. And you'll also have a list of schemas. So we're going to do 2.2. Schema 3.0 is coming very soon. What we would do is click Initialize, and this will go and find all of the possible stations and monitors for use in display in XML Reporter. Basically everything that has an AQS code. Here we only have two because it's a test system, like I said. Two sites, Devil's Lake and Madison East, and a list of parameters on each. Just looking through this earlier today, I noticed that one of them, I turned it off. There was one that didn't have a parameter code, so I turned that off so it didn't show up in here. But there is a list of all of the parameters. You can see their parameter code, their units, the monitor type in the Invista system, any description about the monitor. Basically, there's a lot of information in this one line just to make sure that you're looking at what you think you're looking at, in case you have two that are similarly named in a single station. We can save this report now. We could also create another report. So if we did a new report, we could name it Nathan Webinar, set it to the schema 2.2. You'll see a new report's created, and we could say We don't want Madison East in that one. We'll just do Devil's Lake in this one report. So you could have a report for each of several regions, or several different users could have different reports. We'll save that one too. And that's all that's really needed on this screen. We can go down to the report viewer, and we'll select the AQS report. You'll see that it has all of the substances checked, and it's kind of combined them. So if there was SO2 at both sites, there's only one SO2 listed here in the substance name section. And then above that, you can see that there's the stations. If we were to uncheck the Devil's Lake station, we wouldn't get any data from that in our report. And then we also have the counties, which is, it will be a different term in the NAPS reporter, but the same idea will be here to help you filter down where your sites are. We can go from county to station to substance and filter what we see. That's the main part of the formula, or the big part. We can go through here and see that there's a lot of settings that are smaller that can be applied to what's going to be generated for submission. We can say that we're going to do a raw data report, confirm the schema, set the date time frame for the report. So here we're looking for 2 months. I guess we'll just take that down to 1 month. You can also use the last time that you sent data as an option. Data validity code. This would indicate that you'd only want to send the stuff that was valid, or you can send all of the data. Typically that would be set to all the data. Data approval indicator. This is all data right now, but it could be set to validated data only, so that way only the data that you said is validated in this application is what is sent in the file. There's another webinar on validating data processes, so that would be helpful in understanding what the validated data only would be. Include monitor details would just be adding metadata, but no extended data for now. A sample duration, this is hourly at the moment. If you were doing 5-minute SO2, you could use the 5-minute section here. And the monitor type, I'm actually not sure where this filter comes in, but I know that you have all of the standard options here. If we just say unknown, it leaves everything selected. So these are just basically more ways to decide what you want to send. There are now several buttons up in this filter control section, and really the bottom 3 aren't related to the filters. I'm not quite sure why they're there in the filter control section. But the first one is preview selections, and what it does is it lists the site, and then it tells us the monitor that's at each site that's going. So we can look at the site information here. And it's all based on codes because that's all that's really going to into the file. This is just a tree view to make sure that you have selected the things that you want. It's not necessary to look at this if you're confident. There is an option to review/edit data. I'd recommend not doing the edits so much, but you can review the data here that will be in the file just to make sure that it meets what you were looking at sending. And you would do that by parameter. So we can close that. And then preview report data. This will generate, oops, there must be none in here somewhere. We'll make it, there it is, no shelter temperature. You see shelter temperature doesn't have a parameter code, so it popped up with an error that said no parameter code was found. And now it should create data. And you can see this is a quite large report, and it's in XML format. And it also gives the measurement value for whatever parameter we happen to be on, the action code for AQS, a data validity code, approval indicator. So this is a very large file that's been created. Let me see here. I don't know why we have that. I don't think it will connect. Oh, it did. Okay. So I'm not going to actually click the submit button because we have some login information for Idaho still in this one, so I don't want to confuse anybody. I certainly don't want to submit data. Okay. So So there, it is attempted to send, and it gives us a transaction ID. It didn't actually send it, so it's marking it as completed. It didn't finish the report. Percent complete is 0. But this is the screen that you would see when data is submitted. It goes through 3 steps. One, it checks the connection. Then it generates and sends the report. It will give you a transaction ID, which is obviously generated before the report is sent. Then you can have that transaction ID to check the status for it as it's processing. If you've done this in the past, or if you've watched AQS process data, it's not unusual for it to take quite a long time. So there's this check report status button that you can be pressing, and it goes and checks at the time. Of course, the file is not sent, so it says it's completed. Normally, it'll say processing for a few minutes, and then it'll say completed. If you want to generate an XML file manually and then send it manually later, you can browse to a file and submit that way. So you have to browse for a file to send in. You can do that. You can even do the AQS re-engineered errors this way. And zip it up as it's required for the CDX submission. The last feature here is just to check the transaction. So if you have a transaction ID, you can paste it in here and just check the status. Those are for the big ones that take overnight to process in the morning. There are support for RAs and RPs, but that's being deprecated in favor of the Schema 3.0, which will be available at the end of the year in this program. In fact, the programmer is working on it quite a bit right now. In addition to that, many, if not all, probably not all, but many of the metadata flows for the station and monitor details will be available here, and they will have their own tabs. There will be a station metadata and a monitor metadata tab. These tabs have already been laid out. They already have screenshots available for them. I didn't gather them for this meeting. I didn't want to overload anybody. But you'll be able to add all of the AQS metadata and manage it through XML Reporter and the Invista system in the end. And that also goes for the NAPS Exchange Reporter, where you'll be able to edit that metadata and send it in. Does anybody have any questions about XML Reporter? Like I said, it's a...
Nathan,
oh, go ahead.
I did have, this is Grant, Wisconsin. I had one question. I don't understand the difference in the data monitor criteria between the data validity code drop-down and the data approval indicator.
Sure. The validity code would be to say only send the data that you've said is a valid data point. So if it was in calibration during that period, you wouldn't send it if you said valid status only. The data approval indicator means that in the Invista system, when you've gone through the edits and then you've applied the validation settings, I think we talked about that just a couple weeks ago. Once you've applied those validation settings to it, it's marked as validated. And that can apply to data that happens to be invalid. So you can have data that you've certified as being in cal during that period. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes more sense. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Okay, like I said, it's a streamlined, it's a one-trick program, really. It's just getting data into the data clients that you have, like EPA or Environment Canada. So the goal is going to be to take data from Invista, put it in the format that's required, ensure that you're only getting the data that you want, and sending it on. And that the two big things that are coming in the near future are updates to support the Schema 3.0 with the QA data flow and all of the new stuff for AQS. And then the metadata screens are coming soon as well. So that's it.
Nathan, I actually have one more question.
Sure.
Is the RB data flow going to be supported?
Yes.
Blank data?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
And is there a way to delete data say you submit the wrong data?
Yeah, the action, right?
You change the action? Okay.
So you can, so you could actually have a, let's say if we create a report and we say AQS delete.
Okay. Okay.
And we change this
usually
action.
have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you have to do it when you don't want to, but you do.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, that's it for now. Grant, I know you might have a couple other people there, and we should stay on the line for a little bit to continue the conversation, but that's all I had for the group.
Thanks, Nate.
Bye.